Hello, my name is Stephen Foston from North Lincolnshire Safer Neighbourhoods. We're here today to do an interview with Dr. Shane Johnson, who is of the University College London Dando Institute of Crime Science, who assisted us with the development of the Vigilance Predictive Burglary Modeller. How did you and UCL become involved in developing the theory that domestic burglaries follow a predictable pattern?
Well, we've been interested in predicting when and where crimes take place for some time. And what we've known for a long time is that crime clusters in space, forming hotspots. What we'd also known was that some houses, in the case of burglary, are victimised on more than one occasion. So we get what we call repeat victimisation. And there were two ideas as to why repeat victimisation might take place. First of all, that some homes are just more vulnerable than others, so they're repeatedly victimised by a range of different offenders, quite independently. The second theory is that an offender, having burgled a home on one occasion, will return to those homes that offer good rewards, low risks, and so on. When we look at patterns of repeat victimisation, and in particular how much time elapses between sequential events, what we find is that typically most repeat victimisations take place very quickly after a first offence. And that suggests to us that it's the work of a returning offender. Interviews with offenders suggest the same thing. And that's obviously useful in preventing crimes against the same household, because you can direct resources to those homes which have been previously burgled, and we know that they're at heightened risk. But our question was, does that risk spread to nearby homes? So an offender having burgled one home that was attractive would surely see other attractive homes nearby and possibly return to those. So to test whether or not that was the case, we borrowed a technique from the field of epidemiology used to test for the spread of infectious diseases. And what we found is that when we analysed burglary data in the UK, that burglary does in fact spread in much the same way as an infectious disease. Subsequently, we worked with colleagues in the United States, Australia and the Netherlands, and we found exactly the same patterns across all those different countries. And the interesting thing here was that basically burglary was exhibiting a regularity. Events were more likely to occur close in space and time to previous events, which suggests that that kind of offence would be predictable.
That's fine. You tested the theory in a case study that you conducted for the Home Office with East Midlands Police. Please can you describe the main conclusions of this case study? Did it support the notion that burglaries do follow a predictable pattern?
Yeah, well first of all what we did is to look at a series of discrete areas in the East Midlands and look to see whether or not it was the case that the burglaries did spread in much the same way as an infectious disease. And that's in fact what we found. What we subsequently did then was to develop a predictive model based on those findings to determine whether or not we could predict where crimes would occur in the future. So for example, we'd take something like 2 months of historic data and we generate a prediction using a traditional hotspotting method, and then we test that against the new method we developed to see whether or not the new method was in fact more predictive or about the same. And what we found is that for the areas we looked at, it was in fact more predictive to use the newly developed model, which took advantage of the fact that we know that risk spreads in much the same way as a disease.
Thank you. How have you progressed and refined the work further since this initial case study was conducted?
We've done a number of things. First of all, we've looked at crimes as detected by the police to see whether or not in fact it is the case that when crimes occur close to each other in space and time, they are the work of the same offender or different offenders. And we find that for the crime of burglary and theft from motor vehicles, it happens that is the case, that crimes that occur near to each other in time and space are generally the work of the same offender. We've also interviewed offenders to ask them whether or not they do return to the same locations, and if so, why did they do so? And they do in fact return to the same locations and target properties nearby to those they've already victimised. And the reasons that they give us are really quite logical. They return to places where they've discovered new opportunities, where the risks are low and the rewards are perceived as being good.
That's fine. Are you pleased that North Lincolnshire has created a working modeller for use by other community safety partnerships based on your case study?
Yeah, we're delighted to see the application of the work that we've been developing. One of the frustrations of being an academic sometimes is that you do research and you publish articles. Some of those might attract media attention, but often we can't necessarily get the research or an application to the hands of those that might use it.
North Lincolnshire intend to use the outputs from the modeller to provide a crime prevention citizens alert service. What do you think of this approach?
I think this is really useful. First of all, it empowers those that might be victims in the future, giving them the information that would be useful to them. And also, it can alert them that a crime might have recently occurred, that they may well have been a witness to, and therefore might want to report to the police, or that they should perhaps be vigilant in the near future, because crimes are predicted to occur near where they live.
The current modeller is designed for use by community safety partnerships. Please can you explain what UCL and yourself are doing in cooperation with others in developing a more sophisticated version of the predictive modeller?
Yeah, well, as we said, we've been doing research since we did the initial work, developing the model itself. We've been using computer simulations to test out ideas. We've also been using slightly more sophisticated mathematics to generate predictions. And so we're at a stage at the moment where we're constantly refining and developing that model. And the ultimate intent is to develop some software that would be available to police force agencies and indeed other crime reduction agencies to use that in the real world. But we're not quite there yet.
Right, fine, thank you. The modeller has been designed and tested for use with domestic burglary incidents. Do you believe that modeller can also be used to predict other crime types?
Yeah, I think for a range of other crime types, the logic of why we think burglary spreads in space and time would apply to those as well. For instance, we've looked at the crime theft from a motor vehicle and we've found that spreads in much the same way. For different reasons, we find that gun shootings in Philadelphia also spread. And again, for other reasons, we find that insurgency in Iraq spreads in much the same way. And the important point there is that all of these event types demonstrate this regularity of clustering in space and time. And where regularities exist, it suggests that patterns might be predictable.
Fine, thank you. Following on from the Pilkington case in Leicestershire, North Lincolnshire is working within a consortium of police forces and other partnership agencies to improve the flow of antisocial behaviour incident data between partnership agencies. For the Home Office Antisocial Behaviour Victim Casework Programme, we have proposed the development of a Victims and Vulnerable Persons Index to assist in the identification of people at risk of becoming victims of antisocial behaviour. Do you believe the same principles and methods employed in the development of the Vigilance burglary model can also be applied to antisocial behaviour?
It's an interesting question, and it's an empirical question. We don't know the answer to that right now. As far as I'm aware, there isn't any research out there which has tested this, so it's great to see that you're looking at that. But really, we'll have to wait and see based on the outputs of your research.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Dr. Johnson, and thank you also for your assistance and the assistance of other UCL personnel in the development of the modeller for North Lincolnshire. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.